topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Are you a songwriter? Are you looking to turn your songwriting passion into a full-time gig? Whether you are just at the start of your songwriting journey or a seasoned industry professional, this show is made for you. Welcome to the Songwriter Show, bringing together songwriting news, interviews, and community. Now, welcome your host, Sarantos.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and welcome back to the Songwriter Show. I'm your host, Sarantos. I'm a solo music artist who's been writing lyrics for as long as I can remember. Words are very important to me, and that's why I'm so thrilled to host this show. I believe that every song is a story. The Songwriter Show is broadcast live on number one ranked W4CY Radio with listeners in all 206 countries in the world and every state in the U.S. The station is also licensed with ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and Sound Exchange, with partnerships throughout the music industry, including iHeartRadio and exposure to over 300 million listeners.
And now, welcome this week's special guest.
Tonight's first guest is Neil Fitzsimon. Neil and B were signed to an independent label as a songwriter production team. The band was then formed around them called Pretty Blue Gun. They have since gone back to being a songwriting production team, and they're signed to WTPL in France and Atlantic in the UK and USA. Their last two singles have both reached the top of the well-known American download charts. Welcome to the Songwriter Show, Neil.
Yeah, hello. Good evening.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm fine, actually. Yeah, really good.
Well, thank you for being on the show. I know you're calling us at a little weird hour out there in the London area. We were talking a little bit. You said you recently moved to an island off the coast there?
Yeah, it's in the south of England. It's about 100 miles away from London. And we just liked the idea because we'd spent a while in London, and we just wanted to get somewhere that was a bit more quiet. And this island, it's like going back in time, really. It's really like secluded, but yeah, it's lovely here, and it's been really good. We've been here about 2 years now.
That's wonderful. It's not like Jurassic Park or anything, right? It's not that far back in time.
I don't know. So, all these shops down here close for lunch, which is a thing that doesn't happen in the UK anymore. So it's quite weird to find shops closing.
Yeah. You must find a lot of inspiration for your songwriting there.
Yeah, it's a lovely place, and we've got a studio now in our home as well that we work out from. So yeah, it's a really good setup, and this is what we do full time now.
Okay, how often do you record in the studio?
Pretty busy recently. We've just done 4 tracks with Woody Woodmansey, Bowie's drummer from the Spiders from Mars, and we just done another 2 tracks with Pete Thomas, Elvis Costello's drummer, as well, that are going to be mixed after Christmas. So yeah, wow. we're pretty busy. Yeah.
How often do you try to write, Neil?
I don't really have a set thing for it, really. It's when it comes to me, and it's just, I play the guitar every day, and if I stumble across something, then that starts the process, and then it's just a question of going through the various stages until something works, and then building it up from there, really. So there's no, I think, when I first started, like a lot of songwriters, I was writing all the time. A lot of them are absolutely awful, but I think that's the thing you've got to go through when you first start. So really, I have written, for publishers, I've written to spec, with briefs for films and TV, so I've done that type of thing as well. Yeah, but generally it's just as the mood takes me. We've got so much material anyway, so it's not like we're scratching around for new material. Yeah.
How do you, with that much material, Neil, how do you figure out what's going to make it to the CD or which song you're going to cut?
Yeah, well, I mean, most of the new ones are going on there, but I mean, myself and B were very, we're quite objective about it. Really, we don't really let anything through that we don't like. And I think really when you've done stuff, and we've had like as I say, like a few record deals, a few publishing deals, you get to know what is going to work and everything, and that's what we do really. But we both got to be really happy with the song. Like we don't like really filling an album up just with like with fillers and stuff like that. We want to try and make sure that every track can stand up in its own right.
Sure. And do you exclusively work with B now? Like, is that the only person you release music with, or do you work with other people too?
No, it's just with B. I write all the material and play the guitars and bass, and B does all the vocals and the engineering, because that is a side of the business that I'm not very good with. But we also work with Pat Collier. He was our producer on our first two albums, and he mixes all of our stuff down. He produced Walking on Sunshine, the Katrina and the Waves.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he produced that, and so he mixes all of our stuff, which I think is so vital, really, because that really can make I don't think it could save a track, but I think it can absolutely make like a good song, even like miles. When we get them back from him, we're always amazed at what he's done with them. He's got a brilliant ear, Pat, and that's why we always work with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think mixing engineers can definitely take it to the next level, or if they're not good, they can make your song go to the toilet.
Yeah, they do. It certainly can, yeah.
Yeah. Who are your role models musically? Anyone that you look up to?
Well, it's quite strange. It's not a lot of current people. I think myself and B, we both got a lot from our like mums and dads and everything. And so we're huge Beatle fans. David Bowie, Elvis Costello, and I would say a lot of guitar pop. We love Blondie, the Bangles, stuff like that. So it's all like bands like from a few years ago. And we just think, that is like sadly lacking in a lot of music today. What they offered, really. And I would say our biggest influence are definitely the Beatles. Definitely.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think those are all great. But I'm an 80s child myself, so and the Beatles are wonderful. I mean, how many wonderful hit songs and the melodies, the harmonies, everything, just the lyric writing. I mean, beautiful. Yeah, we love them. Yeah, we're really into that, like melody and, as you said, harmony and everything. I think if you're into the Beatles and that's the thing you're going to gravitate to in your own music. Yeah. What's the coolest place to visit in England, if you could recommend, if I ever make it? I came there a couple of years ago. If I make it back out there, what do you suggest?
Well, I think London for anybody is. I mean, London, there's always something going on. I mean, as far as music is concerned, you can see any type of band any day of the week in London, any genre. There are just gigs all the time, and it's a very active circuit. So I would say definitely London. It's always had a brilliant music scene. We played that when we had our first record deal, like the London music scene, and it can be a tough place as well when you're first starting out. Quite like tough audiences and everything, but I would definitely visit London.
Okay. What's the craziest thing that's happened to you during a gig?
Well, we once played a gig. This was before we actually got signed. So when you're first starting, you play some places that are pretty horrible, and we actually played on a place where from the stage you could see the men's toilets. So
that's hilarious.
Over the top, we could actually see the men in there, and it seemed to be that at the end of every, I don't think it really happened, but it just seemed that the toilet flushed at the end of every time we finished the song. You know what I mean? Whether that was just like an accident or somebody was trying to tell us something, I don't know. But, that became a gig afterwards. It's one of those where you sit down afterwards and you think, what the hell am I doing? But I mean, that's, you've got to go through all that type of stuff, I suppose, really.
Yeah, I think after that, you got to put that in that sound effect in your next song or something like that.
Yeah, you definitely have. It's quite disconcerting to see like one bloke after another going in there like that, where you're up there playing the guitar and singing our heart out, and there's a couple of blokes in there standing at the urinal. So yeah, it was a bit disconcerting.
What's your favorite day of the week?
Favorite day? I always have loved Friday nights. Really, one, it was when school finished, then it was when work finished, and now, even though it's still Friday, we still, myself and B still treat that as special.
Okay, yeah, Friday. There's nothing like Friday, end of the work week, and
yeah, it's lovely. Yeah.
What's the weirdest thing you guys eat in London, like before a gig or something? Any craving or special thing you snack on?
Well, I mean, when I first started, I've got to be honest, I spent most of my time before a gig being sick. It used to get to me like that. I mean, to be quite honest with you, before we did a lot of the gigs, I just used to, like a lot of musicians, I used to have like a couple of shots of whiskey or something like that, and not eat too much. Have a Jim Beam or a Jack Daniels or something. One thing I always used to do with the band, I wasn't being pretentious. I just used to go off and, like, on my own, and have a drink on my own before we played. I just, to get your head sorted out a bit. I know it sounds a bit pretentious, but when you're in a band, you're with them all the time, and it's nice just to have a bit of time on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. No, everyone's got their own thing, and whatever calms you down, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, it does get easier, the live process. I mean, I think the first gig that anyone ever does it, I just found it absolutely terrifying when I first did it. But I think like a lot of things, it's the actual thought of it rather than the actual doing. When you start, you tend to forget that, really, and you do get used to it after a while.
Yeah, that's true. I remember my first gig was at the Toronto Music Festival, and I was so excited I couldn't hear myself at all. Yeah. So it was like, the monitors were terrible, and you go through that, and you just kind of get to a point, you just kind of just go with the flow, whatever happens. You just do your best. Yeah,
that's right. That's all you can do, really. And if you make a mistake, don't let it show on your face. The worst thing you can do, because most of the time, the audience won't even notice that you've made a mistake.
That's so true. I think, we're so picky in our lyrics, our music, our riffs, our shows, and most people, they're just enjoying the moment. It's more visual. They don't even understand some of this stuff. So I think we're too hard on ourselves. Yeah,
I think all musicians are like that, really. You're listening if, like, somebody came in slightly late or something like that. Or, at one gig, I actually found myself playing the chords to the verse in the chorus. And it was just a horrible moment. I was just, but I mean, nobody seemed to notice. I mean, you got to take it when you first start, and a lot of people don't know your songs and everything. They're not going to know what you're doing anyway, really. And as long as as you said, it sounds good and everyone's enjoying themselves, then you can get through it.
Yeah, as long as you get past that dirty look your bandmates gave you, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So one of the questions I like to ask a lot of the guests is, I want to educate other people out there, songwriters and even fans listening to this, but tell us about a scam that you fell for that you want to warn us about, because as musicians, I think, there's so much garbage out there, and anything you can share with us so we can all learn and be part of the community to help each other, I'd appreciate, and I think the fans would too.
Well, I mean, we had a couple of, a lot of musicians, we had a couple of near-run things before we actually did get signed to an independent label, and there was a label that showed interest in us, and they phoned us, and we, they were saying we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I went in for a meeting with them. One of the other band members came in with me, and we're going to do this. We were planning to do this with a single and like that. So all the band were really excited. We had a meeting about it afterwards, and then they wanted to see our manager, which was really just one of our friends, really, and he was booking us gigs. And he went back, and right at the end of the conversation, they said they'd need £5,000 from us.
Oh.
Yeah.
A label asked you for £5,000 to sign you? That's wow.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, when we did get signed, it was quite weird. They actually, it had been going on for a couple of weeks and everything, and they actually phoned on a Saturday night to say they wanted to sign us and everything like that. And I'd had a few beers because we were having a barbecue, and when the A&R man phoned me up, he said, "We want to sign you," and I just said to him, "Look, mate, we've got no money," and he said, "No." He said, "No, we'll pay for everything." And then the following day, they phoned us up and they offered us £10,000, which for a new band's really good, because I got 5,000 for the publishing and there's 5,000 for myself and B and the guitarist for the recording. So that was great. But I would warn people about that, and I've seen this thing as well. I think you must have seen that Music X-Ray, where you've got to pay to actually to pitch stuff to people.
What do you think about that? Music X-Ray, Taxi, what do you think about those?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Music X-Ray is where we got our French publishing deal.
Okay.
That was completely out of the blue, and since then they've invested a lot of money in us. So I think there are some genuine people on there, but some of these people who say that they're an A&R man for Atlantic Records or they've been working with Beyonce, I would not believe them.
Yeah.
I really would.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received from someone?
I suppose really it's don't give up. If you've got a belief in something, and whatever you do, don't change your music to fit in with the current style. You've got to do what you do and what comes naturally to you, and hopefully, if you get it right, then other people are going to see something in it. And that's what we did. Really, we had loads of knockbacks before we actually got. So we actually got a rejection letter from somebody that we'd never even submitted to, which it is disheartening. And I think I've always said if you can't take disappointment and knockbacks, then you shouldn't really get into this business, because that you've got to go through a lot of that until you find the right people, and thankfully that's what we've done.
Yeah, and I don't know what's more disheartening, like you said, wasting time on a publisher, label, someone you think's legit, manager, and then finding out that they want money and it's complete BS, or the flip side where you're trapped in a relationship you can't get out of, that they don't pay attention to you. I don't know what's more disheartening.
Yeah, well, we had that with our first label. Actually, they got a lot of money from Sony, invested a lot of money in licensing deals, and they absolutely went mad with it. I mean, we actually recorded some stuff at Abbey Road, so they were just throwing money around. But by the time it came for our album to come out, they'd run out of money, so they couldn't release our album.
Wow.
And a national radio station in the UK was actually playing one of the songs from it, but nobody could buy it. It was ridiculous. So we got into a legal battle for 16 months with them for restraint of trade, and that was horrible. How did
it feel to record at Abbey Road? I just saw the Ed Sheeran thing on Apple Music, Songwriter. Yeah. And did you get chills? I'd be so...
Oh, yeah, it was great going in there because I'm such a Beatles fanatic. I actually went in. I didn't record in studio, so I can't say it because that was the Beatles one, but I went in there and walked up the steps where George Martin was and everything like that. So, the thing, it really struck me, and I just imagine you've read it, it's so old-fashioned when you go in there. All the technicians walk around in white coats with EMI on it. It's like... Yeah, it's
awesome.
It's really British in there and everything like that, and it was great. Just a brilliant thing to walk up those steps where those four recorded all that stuff. It's unbelievable.
Well, Neil, where can listeners find more information about you, and where can they purchase your music?
We're on all download portals. We've got a website, fitzsimonandbrogan.com. We're with MTS Management, Michael Stover, so people could contact him and they'll give all the information that they need. And we'll right across everything. We've got videos on YouTube. Any way you can think of on it. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. So, and our music is out. Then we've got a new album coming out in the spring that we're looking forward to, and that's through WTPL in France, who are our label as well as our publisher.
Wonderful. All right, tell us the title of this song we're going to listen to now.
It's called The Sheltering Sky, and I tried to write a song that was a little bit similar to one of my other favourite songwriters, is Jimmy Webb, who wrote all the stuff for Glenn Campbell, like By the Time I Get to Phoenix and Galveston, and I tried to write a song like that, yeah.
All right, Neil. Thank you so much for being on the show, and we're going to hear that song right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Neil. Have a great night.
Little sunset descends in heaven, while all of us use love as weapons. Little boy blue left without a trace, he finally found a better place, somewhere that he called home where no one is alone. Take my to cry, we'll walk hand in hand beneath the sheltering sky, you and I, beneath the sheltering sky. Do you recall on that summer's day when we were sure love would go our way? We knew that we no rain, we knew the sun would shine. You put your faith in me, two hearts entwined. Take my hand, there'll be no need to cry. We'll walk hand in hand beneath the sheltering sky, you and I, beneath the sheltering sky. Sheltering sky, you and I. Take my hand, there'll be no need to cry. We'll walk hand in hand beneath the sheltering sky, you and I.
That was a wonderful song by Neil Fitzsimon. Our second guest is James Lee Baker. James is a classically trained musician with influences from acoustic singer-songwriters like David Mead, Alice Paul, John Gorka, Gregory Alan Isakov, Bob Dylan, and Slade Cleaves. In 2017, he released a Texas-inspired full-length project called Home Again. Harnessing his experience and technology, Baker recruited talented studio session musicians accessing performers from LA, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Denver. In March, he released an EP of folk Americana songs called The Canadian River, which we're going to hear later. This single placed number 23 on the folk DJ radio charts in April of 2018, and another song, Two Cageless Birds, went on to be selected for the John O'Hara Songwriting Performance Grant. Welcome to the show, James.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. How is your night going?
It's going great. Today was a great day.
Yeah. So I was reading you have a pretty fascinating story, and I love talking to classically trained musicians because, there's this whole argument out there about people that don't know how to play instruments, that know how to play instruments, that focus on music theory, that don't. And I personally, coming from a background of where I didn't really know anything, and just learning over the years how to write music, how to write chords, how to play an instrument, I feel like you guys have a huge advantage. How do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, when you look at it from the craftsmanship perspective, any trade or any profession, the more you can learn your craft, learn the tools that you're working with, and learn the language or mechanisms that are used to make that happen, the better you can become as a professional. So I think music theory and ear training and music history, and composition, all of those things provide musicians with the ability to become better at what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And even as a songwriter, how things fit together, when you're doing vocal harmonies, understanding thirds, fifths, all that stuff, which, again, when I first started, I was just winging it. I was just doing stuff. I didn't even know what a melody was. And I think, what instrument do you play?
I'm a multi-instrumentalist, but I'm mostly focused on my primary instrument is voice. That's what I went to college for. So I studied vocal performance, did a lot of Italian arias and vocal competitions and that sort of stuff. So voice is my main instrument, and then acoustic guitar. I've been playing acoustic guitar for about 15 years. Piano I've just gotten into. It was always sort of a necessary evil for me, because truly learning piano and mastering it is, in my opinion, is much more difficult than guitar. That's just because you have two hands doing two completely different things.
Yeah.
And being able to keep track of all of the things that those hands are doing is difficult. And so, anyways, it's a long-winded answer. But. Yeah,
no, okay. And when you write songs, lyrics, do you start with the melody? Do you start with guitar? What, an idea in your head? How do you get started?
I'm a lyric guy, so I usually start with an idea, some kind of pitch, like a mission statement or some kind of concept or a story. I flesh out the storyline. That's one of the things that I struggled with early on as a songwriter, was being halfway, through a song or a quarter of the way through a song and not really knowing what I was writing about.
Mm-hmm.
So early on, I really try to construct a mission statement that really encompasses the song's meaning from beginning to end. And then from there, I sort of flesh out what looks a lot like a poem. And then once that's done, I sort of bring music into the picture.
Okay. Do you do any teaching? Do you teach voice or music or anything?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I probably should. I'd like to. I think giving back to people is one of the greatest things that we can do as people. So as professionals.
Yeah. And it just seems with your background, you'd be a great teacher too.
No one said that to me before.
Yeah. What are the typical mistakes that you make in an average week?
Oh, mistakes. When it comes to music, I think 90% of being a musician in today's world is business. Actually getting up on stage or sitting down and writing something. That's the fun part. It's the work is really where I spend most of my time, and that's where I make most of my mistakes. Is emails and conversations, booking, all sorts of things, establishing. And there's a lot of times, probably one of the biggest mistakes I make all the time is I overshoot. I'm too kind up front or too eager. That's one of the things that I have to really be careful with. Today is it takes time to establish relationships with people who don't know you.
Sure.
That's something that I run into a lot.
And do you have any advice for people that obviously vocally you feel very confident on stage, but I've heard vocally trained classical, singers that look down at pop or rock music and they think those vocalists, aren't very good and it's very easy. How do you approach that? And then what advice do you give to people that are trying to sing pop or rock vocally?
Well, that's a good question. I think for me, it's be self-aware of your cynicism, because even Justin Bieber worked his tail off.
Yeah,
all of those guys worked hard to get where they are, and there's a lot of good timing, and but most of it was hard work, and it wasn't overnight. And so, regardless of the genre, I have respect for musicians who are out there full time, because it's not easy. It's extremely demanding for someone who's in the spotlight. Even if they have people doing things for them, they work hard to get there. So I think having that mindset first before sort of approaching any genre or any artist is a good foundation. But I think in general, it depends on what you value. This generation, this day and age, they want to have a good time. They're not so worried about self-transformation or self-reflection. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's, they want to have that they want to have a good time. And music for them is an escape. And so I admire that. But at the same time, those that, like ourselves, who really want to write like deep and introspectively and extrospectively, is share stories and talk about change and all of these other things, there's a place for that. And I think that's ultimately the answer to your question, is there's a place for everyone at the table in music, and everyone has their own philosophies and opinions.
Yeah, that's very well said, and it's refreshing to hear how humble you sound. And I think you're right. I think everyone has their own approach, but yeah, hard work. All those people you mentioned, nothing got handed to them. They've worked hard. Tell me a little bit about what's your favorite, not your favorite genre, but your favorite time period, 80s, 90s, today. What would you say is your favorite decade?
Ooh. Well, I would say mid-70s to mid-80s, like 75 to 85.
Okay.
And I love it in a lot of genres, particularly classic rock. I grew up listening to the artists my father listened to, and we listened to a lot of Rush and Steely Dan and Eagles and
sure.
But I really, I love that genre, because when you look at bands like Rush, for example, they read through a change, and they sort of embrace prog rock and electronics, and just to see that transformation, and the birth of the 80s, I think all that fascinating. There's so when you listen to 80s music, like Phil Collins, for example, or Genesis, and you listen to the style of percussion, you learn that type of percussion was an accident. It was an accident that happened in the studio, sort of this discovery process of utilizing reverb and experimenting with things. And they just stumbled onto this sort of, that 80s snare sound that's very, very dense, So I think that whole era is just fascinating, because there's just so much that humans were discovering in music electronically. And, I think it opened up our palette a lot.
Yeah, I get that. What's your hidden superpower, James? Well,
I have a day job, and I think that's the way of the future for many musicians. I don't try and hide it. It doesn't make me less professional as a musician, but I work for a Silicon Valley-based tech company, and I've been in software engineering in some capacity for 7 or 8 years, and been in IT for about 15. So I would say computer programming, particularly languages like JavaScript and HTML. I specialize in site performance, so I work to improve the speed of websites, which ultimately helps them become more profitable.
Yeah. And I think you hit it on the head. I think nowadays, unless you're a megastar and you have a label backing you up, the rest of us, especially in the indie world, you do have to have a day job. I mean, you're not going to sell a bunch of albums anymore, and the biggest way people make money nowadays is to tour, which has its own set of expenses, and most of us have day jobs, and I think that is the wave of the future.
Yeah, and it's great. I think people ask, there's a sort of unspoken expectation that until we quit our day jobs, we're not professional musicians. But we already are professional musicians. The first time we get our first gig, or the first time that we get paid to do something, the first time someone buys our product online, we're professional. And I think so many of us defer that distinguishment. We defer that, and we don't ever feel some self-accomplishment in that regard. But ultimately, it's my professional career that has fostered so much growth in my music. Without my career, I wouldn't have been able to afford to go into a studio that I really enjoyed, being around talented people, and putting out a good product. Yeah,
I think that's very well said. What's the last movie that made you laugh out loud, James?
I've been watching a lot of comedy specials. And I think Dave Chappelle's latest and Adam Sandler's latest, both of those are hilarious. And for Adam Sandler, his new special is profound.
Yeah, on Netflix, right? On Netflix?
Yeah.
All those little musical tidbits and songs he makes up. You're right. That was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have the Dave Chappelle in my queue, but I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, his new one is wonderful. It's just great because you can see how it's obviously cocky like Dave Chappelle is, but still very profound. He's very wise, philosophical, and I really appreciate that about him.
Yeah. Well, given your day job, I have an interesting question for you. What do you think is going to finally break the internet?
I don't know that it will. I mean, if we look, I'm going to get a little deep here, but if we look at the internet like we looked at life, life is spreading out into the world, right, in all different forms, and its desire and goal is to sort of persist. And I think the internet is really our way to do that, and I think as it continues to grow and blossom and new ideas come about, it is a medium for us to be able to cultivate creativity, not just for music, but for companies, building products. I think that it will only continue to thrive, and I don't know what will happen though. I mean, we say break, it could be a change, right? Like, how long does the internet continue to grow and progress until some kind of reform or like change occurs, and that's yet to be seen. I think maybe AI. I don't fear AI the way that a lot of people do. I think we just fear things that we don't understand, and most people don't understand the complexities of what goes into creating artificial intelligence. But I do think that that's going to have profound implications for humanity. And the stage for AI is going to be the internet, and it's going to take place through bots and through interactive virtual reality and all sorts of things.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, the last question I'm going to ask you before we get to your song: if I gave you a 1-minute Super Bowl ad slot, what would you do with it?
I would probably give it away to someone who could have more impact in positively changing other people's lives, like an organization or something.
Yeah, all right.
That broad of a platform, I think I would use it to help people. Okay.
So, James, tell us a little bit about where our fans can find information about you. Where can they buy your music?
Yeah. So I'm on my website, jamesleebaker.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, and anywhere where you can purchase or stream digital music.
Okay, and tell us about this song we're going to hear in a minute here, The Canadian River. What inspired it?
Well, it's spirituality. You know, I grew up in a spiritual family, and as I became an adult, trying to find my relationship with a higher power, that for me was something I had, you know, as a continuous process, but something I had to discover myself. It's a personal journey and a personal relationship. And, you know, where I grew up in the heart of the Texas Panhandle. And it's a very conservative community surrounded by churches. But, you know, people don't always have the best intentions in that community. And so this song's really about stepping away from the hypocrisies of modern day religion and finding your own relationship with a higher power. As far as the facts, the song's called The Canadian River because about 45 minutes north of Amarillo, Texas, where I grew up, is a river called the Canadian River. So this is just a story of me going to the river and sort of having peace with nature and with God, or whatever you like to call it.
That's a great story. I can't wait to hear it, James. I want to thank you for being on the show, and I hope you have a great night. We're going to hear your song right now.
Awesome. Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right, James. Have a great night.
Sabbath day in this water tower town. The steeples light up as the sun goes down, and every business is closed in the name of the Lord, except for the Christian bookstores. An hour's drive from my front door to my favorite spot near the river shore. Pack the back of my short bed second-hand truck. If I leave right now, get there before dusk. Oh, the Milky Way is my canopy, and the only one holding me is gravity. The river's my church, it's where I come to pray. I am sending thanks with my knees in the clay when I seek forgiveness from all of my mistakes. I let the Canadian River wash my shortcomings away. Now don't get me wrong, I believe that inner voice, but I also believe in a world of choice. If you were God and made the birds and the sky, wouldn't you want to see them fly? I lay my head down and I close my eyes, and I am baptized in golden moonlight. The river's my church, it's where I come to pray. I am sending thanks with my knees in the clay when I seek forgiveness from all of my mistakes. I let the Canadian River shortcomings away. His way of giving praises, and I've got mine. The river's my church, it's where I come to pray. I am sending thanks with my knees in the clay when I seek forgiveness from all of my mistakes. I let the Canadian river wash my shortcomings away.
I want to thank Neil and James for being on the show tonight. Next week is Christmas, and I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas next week. So I'm going to leave you with one of my songs called On This Night. Of course, it's about Christmas Eve and the birth of Jesus. And the night was just special. You could just feel it in the air. Have a Merry Christmas, everyone, next week.
what you did for me, and I
Thank you for listening to The Songwriter Show. To keep the momentum going, head over to www.songwritershow.com and join our free music community of artists, songwriters, and producers. That's www.songwritershow.com.